Hello and welcome to the after party. My illustrious co-host is the Great Order, and I am No White Guilt. Appearing on the honors roll call today is Trent, and that is definitely with a big T, Trent. Thank you very much. Laura, Fionn, Sean, Stefan, Beroxir, and the Good Girl. I warmly appreciate your support, and I am grateful that there are people like yourselves who are driven by a sterling character and sense of destiny. As for the Super Chat crown winner of last week, the crown goes to one of our heroes, the great Quebec, for investing a total of $300. Congratulations and a hearty thank you to you, my friend. In second place was another hero, British Brainwashing Corps, investing $88.14. Thank you as well. Of course, last week was our big birthday party. Jared and I celebrated for 12 hours and live streamed nearly for that long. Although I drank nearly nothing, I am still well hung over from that long celebration. We also have some honorable mentions here today. We have Undisclosed invested $53. Thank you very much. Let's see. Isuzu invested $50. Thank you as well. Luke, again, we saw Luke last night, donated $50 as well. And finally, Laurel invested another $50. You are all champions, and we cannot thank you enough for your support and investment in the cause of white well-being. Super Chat on YouTube or Streamlabs. I did say on Streamlabs, the link is in the description. Jared and I evenly share the Super Chats with our guests. Today, we are joined by none other than Squatting Slav from the YouTube channel Squatting Slav TV. Slav makes wildly successful, informative, and entertaining topical videos, as well as man on the street vids, where he confronts some of the most mentally challenged anti-whites for our enjoyment. He started making vids back in February 2017, and though he squats, he has deservedly reached towering proportions. Born in the distant land of Serbia, he now freezes his ass off in Vancouver, Canada. It's our great pleasure to have Slav with us today. Jared, please welcome our guest while I find him someplace warm to sit.
Well, hopefully he'll find this a warm place. Squatting Slav. Slav, welcome to the after party. This has been a long time in the making. We've been looking forward to speaking to you for a long time, and so many people in our community enjoy your man on the street videos and you going out there, putting yourself out there, confronting people, putting forth the shining a light, I should say, on all the hypocrisy and the insanity out there. It's the kind of thing we need. It's entertaining, but it also is the type of thing that wakes people up and shows people what's going on. So we thank you for your work, and we're excited to take some time to get to know you better and get to know a little bit more about the man behind the glasses. So why don't we just start generally, for anyone that doesn't know, or if you haven't had a chance to describe this before, about what got you started, what motivated you to start doing what you're doing, and what your whole vision was when you started your online presence.
First of all, Patrick and Jared, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a great pleasure to be on here, and I absolutely look forward to all the topics that we're going to tackle during these next hours. So essentially, I started doing YouTube during the Trump election era, predominantly in the post-Trump election era, because I was getting sick and tired of seeing how things were spiraling and the general direction of the left, which was becoming more and more radicalized by the day. And I was even more shocked by the fact that people here in Vancouver, Canada, were protesting Donald Trump, the president of the United States, who absolutely has nothing to do with them. So back then, I sort of took to the streets one day as a joke to see if I could get some reactions, and I put it up online. And a few days later, my video had a few 100,000 hits. And I always had a passion for politics. I studied political sciences in university, and I was always sort of a troll myself. So it made for a perfect combination and an entertaining combination as well. And that's what sort of took off my YouTube career.
What were your beliefs when you were younger before this? I think I heard you on an interview with someone from Russia. I was checking out a little bit of that interview with the Russian guy, and you said that you did have some left-leaning views when you were a little younger. So can we take some time, because this is always good for people to understand your progression?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was in high school and in my sort of freshman years of university, I was heavily indoctrinated by the system. I was never a crazy lefty who was, painting my hair, dyeing my hair blue and green, and, out there screaming, kill babies, support abortion, blah, 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 open the borders. I was always sort of a traditionalist in the sense that, I came from Serbia. I was raised in a Serbian family, and, tradition is a big thing. But at the same time, I was to some extent a victim of the system, the neoliberalist system and the cultural Marxist indoctrination, which sort of started to really kick in full gear when I was in high school around 2007. And this is when we started seeing posters around our high schools here promoting the LGBTQ 3RZ square root of 21 agenda, or whatever the prefixes are. And
it changed this week. You got it wrong. You have to be an ally. You have to be an ally. You have to be up on it every week. I think it ends in pi. I think it ends in pi now. 3.14.
I'll have to double check that.
You have to be a good ally, man. Come on.
So this is when I first started noticing this indoctrination in high school, and then I went on to university, and I found that in university I could never really fit in with the crowd there. And as you know, I took, as I mentioned previously, I was in political sciences, and this was a field that was heavily occupied by extreme liberals, lefties, and people who I just couldn't connect with. So I sort of finished university. I started doing a lot of reading for myself. Started watching these alternative news networks, and that's where the whole red pilling process sort of began for me.
Were there any media-specific YouTube channels or books you mentioned reading that helped change your mind and were part of your evolution you'd like to discuss?
Originally, I started off like most people. I started off by watching Alex Jones and the things that he was saying. I eventually graduated on to people like David Duke and Red Ice TV at the time. There weren't too many sort of alternative news outlets on YouTube back in 2010, 2011, 2012. So I was getting a lot of my information from people like Alex Jones, obviously always taking it with a grain of salt, people like Jesse Ventura. And this, while these people are what I call gatekeepers, they are a good catalyst for people who are looking to sort of expand, their sight and expand their ideas and open-mindedness. So I started off by watching these two. At the time, I wasn't reading too much literature surrounding, politics and history. I read the Gulag Archipelago back then, and I was more into sort of biology and these things. So those were the types of things that I was reading. But yeah, I mean, Alex Jones was the first guy I started to watch, and then David Duke, and I sort of took a break completely. From politics from around 2012 to around 2015. It wasn't sort of at the forefront of my thoughts, but I was always keeping up with things, and really the biggest red pill for me was the migrant crisis. Essentially, the events that the events that took place in 2015, when Europe was seeing hundreds and thousands of people, essentially knocking down its borders, coming over into its lands. And I went back to Serbia in 2015 to visit my extended family, and this is when I was shocked. I saw a park in the middle of the city, just full of tents and full of migrants. Men, women, children. A park that was beautifully decorated was all of a sudden turned into a mess, basically overnight. So that really hit me hard. That was an eyesore that sort of started everything for me, that catalyzed this process of thinking. And from then on, I kind of got back into politics more and more, started reading, and that's how I ended up eventually creating this channel.
It's funny you should say that. Last night I was on Verbo Tempestus, great guys, and it was the first time we spoke. And I said, for me, I didn't have a before and after moment. It was more of a knob being turned up than a switch being flipped. But if I had to pinpoint one before and after moment, just like you said, it was seeing the migrant invasion in Europe when I started to get news of that in the fall of 2015. And what's interesting, especially, is even myself being an American, and there's a geographical distance across the Atlantic Ocean, I had a visceral response. When I saw that, I knew immediately it was a Trojan horse. We started hearing the horror stories. Obviously, there had been terror attacks before then, but more bad news started to come out of Europe. And I felt like a family member of mine was getting raped. I mean, I felt it in my body. And I don't know what you feel about this, but to me, it makes sense to say, it's not too far out there to say that there is actually some kind of a genetic memory and tie to your people that are more closely related to you. And I had that kind of visceral response. I mean, it sometimes actually almost was physical, my response to this, and it changed the course of my life. That was one of the moments, like you, where I said, I have to do something about this. I have to be involved. The land of our ancestors and the whole white Western world, because we see the same patterns around the whole world, from Australia to the United States and everywhere in between. The same things are happening. The same messages to undermine our people, the same attacks mentally, physically, spiritually. But yeah, the migrant crisis was a very, very big one for me.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The way the cognitive dissonance has a way of absolutely throwing the eyes wide open for some, but for others, throwing them closed shut. It's amazing how when some of these, and this is one of the things that I hear from a lot of anti-whites, and you all folks listening live and in replay will note this as well, I'm sure. But if you haven't, pay close attention moving forward. The anti-whites are absolutely terrified of reality. They hate statistics. They hate data. They want to get away from it as quickly as they can. They don't like seeing the world as it really is. They like to retreat into their imaginations, into the imaginary world. This is another reason why certain content producers out there who are able to perpetuate the fantasies, like Sargon of Akkad, are able to rake in many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. He doesn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of wisdom, far from it. I think Richard pointed that out to us and made that clear to everyone in their debate. But what he does do, or what he did do, was he enabled these people to continue in their fantasy. He gave them logical, or what apparently was logical conclusions, logical deductions, what smart looks like to stupid people. He was able to give them that comfort and that illusion day after day, week after week. And eventually what ended up happening, I feel, for Sargon was that he knew that he was selling these people a lie. He knew that he was selling them a fantasy. Of course, that didn't necessarily undermine or stop him from comforting himself with a new car and a new house and a new et cetera off of the perpetuation of their illusions or delusions. But what did tire him out was having to come up with arguments that were clearly faulty in order to get around reality. So that would obviously, I could only imagine, was exhausting, and it eventually showed on him. I mean, we watched him age 10 years in a matter of a couple of years as he was engaged in this process of selling this illusion or delusion to his fans. And if you were one of those people, I don't blame you. It's normal to want to live an illusion, to want to live in an imaginary world where there are no harsh realities, where all of these promises of the kumbaya and we all are going to just hold hands and dance around the fire is going to end up being the reality. But in fact, it's not. You know it's not. I know it's not. We know what has to be done for us to have the sort of stable and security and peace that Western civilization provides us. And that is the perpetuation of Westernkind and the biospirit that thrives in us alone. And so it is a difficult step. It is a step that takes courage. And this is to round it back to the point I was making before I pass it back, is that many of the anti-whites that I have spoken with, a theme that recurs is those anti-whites that have transitioned, that have matured sociopolitically and come to the cause of white well-being. They say over and over, I had to be brave. I had to be courageous. I had to finally make the decision that I was just going to look at the world as it actually is. And then that's when they overcame it. It is a really, I guess it's a deep moment to hear that coming from the mouth of an anti-white, that revelation that you know to be true, that you can see on their faces and hear in their words and hear in their arguments. But to have them stand in front of you and say, look, I was just terrified about looking at the actual data and the reality. And so I ran from it and indulged this fantasy of this multiracial utopia that we were promised. So take that into consideration when you're talking with these people, but also keep in mind that people like Slav, people like Jared, they were affected differently. They had the maturity, they had the intelligence, they had the courage, they had the integrity, they had the character that even though they had been taught something by the superstructure, by this anti-white regime all around the West, that when they ran into it face to face, they were able to say, adult enough to say, mature enough to say that something is not right with what I've been taught. So rather than retreat to the nursery like the anti-whites do, these two brave men plowed forward in search of the truth, as all of you who are listening right now and in replay are doing as well. And so I salute you all for that. So I'll pass it back. Slav, I think you were maybe ready to say something.
Yeah, that's spot on, Patrick. Everything you said was absolutely true. I mean, I just wanted to add on to what Jared was saying. Imagine coming from a completely homogenous country like Serbia, which is almost completely homogenous. Sure, we have a Roma population, we have a Gypsy population, but it's not noticeable. It's a predominantly white country. Now, imagine coming from that country and then going back to it after some years and seeing all these foreigners who have a completely backwards Jason, who have a completely backwards value system and appearance to them, congregating to the center of your city and essentially just leaving a big dump behind them. It's absolutely shocking to the senses. And it's something that, it's an image that has stayed with me since that time when I went back. And I really wasn't buying all the sensationalism about the migrant crisis, in early 2015, once we started to sort of hear about it in the mainstream media and across these various other independent news outlets. I wasn't really buying the sensationalism until I went back that year and I saw it for myself. And that's when it really hit me. And I think for a lot of people, the breaking point is sort of witnessing these things firsthand. And that's exactly why I decided to go and follow up and visit one of these so-called refugee centers in Serbia, because I wanted to see, is it really full of women and children? Are we being told the truth by these mainstream media conglomerates? By the dinosaur media, or is it really just young men and men of fighting age, like we're being told by independent news sources? And unsurprisingly, it was in fact all young men, between the ages of maybe 18 to 35, from the maybe 300 people that I saw that day, I saw maybe 2 or 3 families, 2 or 3 children, and the rest were men. Now, luckily, these people don't stay in Serbia. Serbia is part of the Balkan route that the migrants take to get to Western and Northern Europe. So they're essentially there just for a few days until their documents are processed, and then they're off to Western Europe. So they don't stay around. But at the same time, it was absolutely shocking to see these people who are completely different from us in appearance, in customs, in behavior, just congregating to the middle of the city and leaving this third world mess behind them.
Mm.
You may be interested to know, and I just shared it in the chat, I'll do it again. From day one on my site, as I said, I was so moved by the migrant invasion that I set up a page that is a mixture of stories from newspapers and journals, usually left-leaning or center, if you could say something is center. I wanted it to be something that could red pill people, something you could share with friends and family. Obviously, if all of my sources were allegedly right-wing publications, and that would lose a little of the sting. So I have the BBC and the Times of London and the New York Times, a lot of things about all related to the migrant invasion. And also interspersed are many testimonial videos, like a girl who was present at the Cologne attacks on New Year's Eve in Germany. Many things laid out you can scroll through. It's not supposed to be a running news tally, so it's not something that I keep updating. But as of that time, as of when I launched my site last year, I wanted to have everything in one place to be a resource so that you can share it with someone in your life, have them look at some of this, and then ask them, can you say to me something's not going on here, that something is not awry here? So that's called the Euro Migrant Crisis Fact Sheet. It is a feature on my site. But you're talking about Serbia, and we wanted to get to this anyway, so it's a perfect time since you're mentioning it. I'd love to hear about your experiences and what it means to you to be Serbian in particular, and Slav is obviously in your name, so being Slavic is part of your identity. What that means to you and what the traditions there are like. Paint a picture for us however you'd like, and contrast it to what you were seeing with these migrants, and more largely how that fits into your wider European or white identity as well.
Right. So I emigrated from Serbia to Canada back in 1995, and this was during the conflict. I was actually born in the capital city of Belgrade, so I never really witnessed, the war, the fighting, the conflict firsthand. But my family, like all families, were to some extent hit by the sanctions that were implemented by the West at the time. So it wasn't the best time, to sort of be living there. At the same time, though, I had a wonderful childhood there. And I can't complain, it was completely safe. Grew up in a wonderful neighborhood. We'd be outside playing tag and hide and seek until 1 a.m., something that I couldn't do in Canada till I was, 13 or 14 years old. So to me, Serbia is still very, very close to my heart. I absolutely love it. It's a huge part of my identity. I go back there religiously almost every summer to see my extended family, my grandparents, and my cousins, but also just to sort of immerse in that setting and really feel that setting, because I feel a very strong connection to it. Essentially, I was born there, and I have a lot of pride for that country. I think it's produced a lot of highly intelligent people. Nikola Tesla was a Serbian, for the people who don't know. It's produced, for a country of that size, it's produced an enormous amount of brains, scientists, world-class athletes, as you guys may be aware of. So I have a lot of love for Serbia. My ties to Serbia are still very, very strong because I was born there and because I do go there so frequently. And I've said this before. I think in the next few years, if I can manage to, I will definitely look to move back to Serbia, because I do feel a lot more connected to Serbia. And I just feel when I'm back there, I feel a lot more open. I can talk to people openly. It's a homogenous setting. There's no political correctness. I can say whatever I want without biting my tongue, without fearing what someone is going to think or say, and all these things that you sort of have to watch out for in Canada. So yeah, it's just it's a part of me that's it's rooted in me, most likely just because I had such a good experience growing up there. And I have only positive things to say about Serbia, even though it's become sort of a banana republic right now with a pro-Western puppet government. But at the same time, for everyday life there, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a shame that Western media has demonized Serbia so much. Within the past 20 years, starting with the Balkan Wars and then the NATO bombing of Serbia in 1999. The media has essentially painted Serbs as these mini Russians who are, as we know, there's a lot of anti-Russian sentiment, and that's where this anti-Serbian sentiment stems from as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a few questions on this topic, and that's what we do. We have a nice 2 hours here on our show, and we really like to get to know the content creators. I have a few questions about identity, but the first thing that came to my mind when you were speaking is, what was your experience going from a smaller, more homogenous European country like Serbia into a colonial society like Canada that has also been more affected by the rot of the West post-1960s and all of the cultural revolution of the 1960s, right? Do you have any observations about the differences and how connected people are to their roots in Serbia? Did you see less of that connection to a long history like you have in Europe when you were on the North American continent?
Let me jump in really quick with a couple super chats. Kuel27 writing with 21.99 euros. Can Eastern Europe stave off the onslaught once the West has fallen? What is the role of Russia in the protection of white well-being, a fellow Slav? So we'll tack that on to Jared's question, and we will also add Johnny Jones super chatting with $10. Everyone should own some Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and learn how to use it. Stable coins like Tether could be funding options. Dollar-pegged crypto. No centralized entity can shut down cryptos. So again, Slav, it is Jared's question about the juxtaposition between coming from that homogeneous environment, small homogeneous environment, to the witch's cauldron of Canada and multiracialism. And as well, to tack on to that, can Eastern Europe stave off the onslaught once the West has fallen? Of course, that presupposes that it will, I guess, completely fall. And at least, I guess we could speak to that question maybe a little bit more, and maybe in a little bit more of a timely way, in that, can Eastern Europe remain homogeneous? Can it remain a white countries as the West continues to become multiracial and then suffer the consequences of that multiracialism? So to Jared's question first, and then this one from Kuel, if you could, please, sir.
Yeah, so when I came here to Canada, I was only 5 years old. And, when you're that young, these things don't really affect you as much. Although I do recall, even as a child, arriving from a homogenous country to Canada and, seeing visible minorities, it definitely was strange for me, for the first couple months or the first year. I couldn't really say all the little childish jokes that I could, say back in Serbia. And at the time, there isn't this whole stigma around political correctness, because you don't really know what you definitely feel that you're in a different setting, and that that it is a little bit more tense. There are rules that you have to respect now. There's things you can't joke about, things that you can't say, which I could have openly joked about and spoken about in Serbia, even in my childhood. Now, in terms of Eastern Europe, I do see a sort of civilizational rift happening in Europe between the East and the West. I do believe that the East is going to remain largely homogenous and white, and we can see it. We can see this happening in countries such as Poland and Hungary, which have become the sort of poster child nations of populism and traditionalism and conservatism. So I think there is a big rift happening in Europe right now between the East and the West, and I do believe that that the East has a much lower tolerance to diversity and to things like open borders and mass migration than the West. And I really don't see this changing. Despite the pressure from the globalists, echo, to sort of enact these plans. But I honestly don't. I don't see it changing, and I do recommend for anyone that's interested in Eastern Europe to really go there and witness it firsthand. Like I said, witnessing things firsthand is the best way to get a feel for the environment, the people, and the culture. And I mean, go ahead, visit London, and then book a trip to Poland or Hungary, and you'll witness this contrast firsthand, and you'll be able to tell for yourself whether it's working out or not.
Yeah, I'm sure the contrast is devastating. What about the way Serbians see the rest of Europe and the EU in particular? And do you think that they're going to be able to, I trust you that the people don't want this mass migration and they want to keep the integrity of their culture, their ethno-culture. But what about the whole international cartel, the banking? Do you think that Eastern Europe is going to be able to throw that off and still be able to function?
Well, when I go back right now, and I speak to most young people in Serbia, they all want to leave Serbia because the economy isn't that good. The average person there makes maybe 250 to 300 euros a month, which is absolutely nothing. It's ridiculous. So Serbia's main problem right now is this massive brain drain that's happening. We have roughly 30,000 people leaving the country on an annual basis, and for a country of our size, this is a very, very big problem. Now, these same people, young people mostly in Serbia, most of them tend to be pro EU, simply because they see the West as the promised land, as a place where they're going to be able to to make their money and live more secure lives. But I mean, that's kind of an illusion right now, because as you guys know, living in the West and the rates of inflation right now are absolutely crazy, and even living in the West right now is very tight. So these people don't understand that leaving Serbia won't necessarily solve all their problems, just because the circumstances in the West have also changed drastically over the past 20 years or so. Now, Serbia is currently sort of a fence-sitter country. It's sort of it's sitting between the EU influence and the Russian influence, and it's trying to milk both at the same time. And this is an okay political strategy for now, but I don't see it as being a very dominant one or a very successful one in the long run. So essentially, what I think is going to happen, or what needs to happen, is that that Serbia becomes more autonomous and more self-sufficient, instead of leaning towards Russia, and instead of looking towards the EU for help. And by doing this, it will sort of reject the entire banking system. And I do believe that this is slowly going to happen. There are some protests happening right now in Serbia that aren't really making the mainstream news at all. So things will change. It will be a slow process, but I am very faithful that things will go in the right direction.
Do you know anything about, and I don't know much about this other than just hearing about it, of this Central European coalition that's forming with Poland and Hungary and the Czech Republic? there's a few words for it, a few different names, like Mare something. Are there Serbians who want to kind of see a brotherhood with those more Central European states in the Balkans and then the middle of Europe, a little geographically closer, who are trying to form something that's a little different than either the EU Western influence or the Russian bloc?
I honestly haven't heard too much about that, but it really depends. In Serbia, there's quite a mixed sentiment, towards our neighbors. Some people, for instance, some people who still embrace communism and the socialist ideals. They would love for Serbia to be a part of Yugoslavia again. Some people still love Croatia, love Bosnia, and other Serbs are a lot more sort of ethnocentric. They're a lot more nationalist, and they reject this sort of pan-European unity. So I haven't really heard much about this, but I would imagine that there's sort of a mixed sentiment about this. The division or the rift in Serbia is sort of more between the EU and Russia. A lot more Serbs are more pro-Russia than they are per se, looking for some kind of union between Poland and these other Slavic countries, despite our obvious, our Slavic roots and our similarities.
Yeah, my understanding is it's an alliance more than a pan-European thing where you could still definitely maintain your ethnicity and your nationality. None of us want that to go away. As Jason put so well, when we have our vision of the world come through, the Irish will be more Irish, the Serbians will be more Serbian. We're not Americans who think that it's just all one thing. Obviously not. There are different expressions of European man, which kind of goes into what I wanted to ask. Now, you were using the word the West. And obviously, in the context of how you were discussing it, I understood you meant Western Europe and kind of the Anglo-American sphere and everything that they affect. But what is your sense, not politically, but more racially, personally, of a wider European? Because I sometimes use Western civilization and European interchangeably. So you have roots in Eastern Europe. Is there a sense of you that sees all Europeans as your brothers? Do you have a nested above that sense of being Serbian, a civilizational or racial sense of being white or European? How do you understand all that?
Yeah, I should have clarified that. When I mention the West and use that term, I'm referring to Western Europe. So the sort of the Anglosphere, Germany and the Scandinavian countries up there in regards to the migrant crisis. Now, in terms of identity, yeah, I absolutely see all Europeans as my brothers to some extent. I think our whiteness is the unifying factor which defines us as Europeans, obviously. But at the same time, I do support ethno-nationalism, and I do believe that while we are all white and European, that we have significantly different customs, cultures, traditions, and histories, which make us all beautiful and unique. And I think we need to preserve those. And these big conglomerates and groups such as the European Union are absolutely trying to destroy this, and destroy borders, and have this big mix of people in Europe. When the fact is that there's absolutely no need for this. We're all unique. We all have different histories. There was a lot of tension between various European nations throughout history, and I think we can all appreciate these things, learn from them, and move on while maintaining our own patriotism, our own nationalities, languages, and preserving our own histories and traditions.
I'm going to jump in quickly with some super chats before we move on to the next questions for our great guest. Josh Randall super chatting with $10. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who super chats. He writes, Squatting Slav has the coolest accent in the alt-right. I agree. It is a fantastic accent. We have Christoph super chatting with $4.99. My brother says the Squatting Slav is badass. I agree. Thank you very much for that super chat as well. And remember, folks, you can super chat here on YouTube or Streamlabs. The link is in the description. So, and I really like what you had to say, Slav, about this. And Jared spoke directly to my my sentiment that once we recapture our destiny as a people, see, there is clearly a unifying biospirit throughout the totality of Westernkind, whether we're born in Estonia, or whether we're born in Germany or Russia or Canada. There is a unifying spirit. There's something clearly that runs through the heart of our people that if you were to pluck us off of this planet and plant us someplace else, we would recreate this Western civilization. Something also, I think, oh, look at that. What a beautiful pussy cat. what I think is really beautiful as well is that we can easily transition. So Slav, you were able to go from Serbia as a youngster, transplant to Canada, just another what we refer to as a Western civilization, and you were able to easily acclimate to that. And the reason why is because your biospirit is being reflected back at you by way of the Western environment that you're in. However, if you were to be transported to, say, Nigeria, that would not be an easy transition. Not only would it be a new language, but the biospirit of those people on that environment that would be reflected back at you would be something that would be extremely uncomfortable, extremely unwelcoming. That's why, even though we have had, for example, the Jewish people with us for thousands of years, they have still not assimilated. That's why, even though we have had blacks with us for hundreds of years, they have still not assimilated. They still are a very distinct people. Now, we can have scenarios where individuals in particular, and especially, for the benefit of their audience, can adopt or claim to adopt the norms. And this is something that I talk about relative to having numerical courage and numerical diffidence for people when they're in your civilization. We've seen for a long time in the West where anti-whites will say, or your average white person will say, oh, well, this particular non-white group has entered and they do everything the way we do things. They have embraced Western civilization, they've embraced America, or they've embraced Canada, or whatever country it might be that they've moved to. But really what they are seeing is a misattribution is what it is. What they're seeing is numerical diffidence. What they're seeing is a people who feel afraid to express themselves and what they truly have in themselves. And so while the people are in a state of numerical diffidence, they will imitate to the best of their ability the norms of the stronger group. However, we have also seen throughout history that as soon as a group begins to feel numerical courage relative to the other groups that are surrounding them, they begin expressing their norms. They begin expressing that biospirit that is inside of them onto their environment. They project it onto their environment. And that is what engenders what we refer to as a cultural arms race. Culture is ultimately just the aggregate of a people's biospirit projected onto their environment. So once we have this cultural arms race, which is what we have across the West, you have winners and losers. And eventually, cultural arms races always end up in balkanization and violent warfare, violent bloodshed. That is the kind of thing that we hope to prevent from happening. But it is the exact kind of thing that has happened in every single case throughout all of human history. There isn't a single case where an elite of any group brought together multivarious people, brought them together, and then somehow they just harmoniously became a single people. No, in every case, it took extreme physical force to keep those people locked together. It took a scapegoat community that they could have the rest of the groups blame for all of their hardships. What do we have in the West? We have that in the form of white people, of Westernkind. But then eventually the regime lacks the ability to keep these disparate pieces from flying apart and coming together in bloodshed. It has happened every single case throughout human history. There'll be no difference unless we put an end to this multiracial idea that we can all just come together and somehow, and I guess in the eyes of what we see, certainly in America, but across the West, we see this new sort of consumerist producer society, that if we're going to have a culture of any sort, it's going to be to some sort of hip hop beat and some sort of thuggish, every commercial, if you're going to have, they're going to show you like the bad car. And then when they show you, the bad as in like suboptimal car, the car that is a lemon. And then when they show you the good car, suddenly a rap beat comes on the television, or and they start playing this rap song as though that's the culture and the entertainment that we seek. When of course, if they were actually trying to sell us those cars, white people being the majority of the population, they're going to break out in some sort of rock and roll or something of that nature, some sort of hard rock that's going to speak to us, maybe some hardcore guitar riff, rather than something that came out of the deepest, darkest inner ghetto of the city. So yeah, it's something that when we recapture our destiny, and Jared reiterated it beautifully, when we recapture our destiny, we like having our little differences, and we like celebrating our little differences. We think it's the most fascinating thing to have our little, to entertain ourselves with the little dances of the little Serbian girls, for example, and what they do in there. We find that fascinating. And then, then the Irish are going to find this other group's fat. So we love each other's slight differences, slight hues of Western civilization. So a consequence of and certainly a recapturing of our destiny presupposes that we have come together as a people. So it presupposes that we're already beyond the phase that we're deciding that we're going to kill each other because of differences, as we have in the past with these brothers' wars. So once we come together in that unity to recapture our destiny, that leadership at that time is going to be a benign and loving leadership that is going to do everything it can to ensure that Russia is more Russian than it ever has been, Serbia is more Serbia than it has ever been, the southern United States are going to be more southern than they have ever been. We're going to want these things because it's something that truly speaks to our hearts and our souls and really makes those hearts and souls sing. So I'll pass it back.
Yeah, we're a dynamic people. That's the thing that you need to understand. We have a fascinating super chat, but Slav, I wanted to give you a chance. Do you have anything to say with what Jason just said, or shall I read the next super chat?
You can read the next super chat, but yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think what makes us all beautiful and unique are these differences. And, as long as we can enjoy these differences amongst us and between us, without them, overwhelming us or overwhelming a certain group or becoming the dominant group, then I don't see any problem with this. And I think this is the beauty of Europe for those of you who have visited it, or those of you who are looking to visit it. It's the fact that it's so small that within 3 hours you can literally be in another country, surrounded by different traditions, different languages, different histories, different people, and this is something truly beautiful, and this is something that Canada completely lacks, and the U.S. lacks, unless you're in the south of the U.S. So this is the true beauty of European cultures, and it's something that I want to see preserved, and something that I think will survive. And as we see right now, we have this rejection of modernity happening primarily in Eastern Europe for that very reason, because people see that everything is trying to be made into this one global mix of this dominant mainstream culture, and I think everyone's rejecting this.
Yeah, we certainly are here, and we understand it's emanating from America, but we can be critical of the American empire, even though we can be proud of the true American folk and the different regions and kinds of people here, kinds of white identity here, as Jason speaks to. Just as a quick note, people in the chat, a couple of people, including Spartan Warrior Queen, said the Visegrad group. Now, I do know that name. I was thinking of another word that's similar that begins with an M, but since I can't remember that word that begins with an M, I will mention to you, Slav, yes, the Visegrad group I know is Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. They've formed some kind of an alliance and are trying to help each other resist the migrant invasion and all of these things. Some of the leadership in Austria and, of course, Salvini in Italy, I think, are warming up to them as well. So you see more right in the middle of Europe, this spine of resistance. So something to keep an eye on, maybe something we can all research a little bit and talk more about at a later date. Now, we have a couple of super chats through Streamlabs. Any of you who know the news this week know that Jason, along with other content creators, had his Streamlabs terminated. Don't tell anybody, keep this hush hush, but mine is still up, and we appreciate any way you can give, but Streamlabs is definitely our preferred way. It gets the whole amount, essentially the whole amount, to us and to our guest, as opposed to YouTube taking 33%. So me and the mods have been putting up the Streamlabs link. We have Timothy gave $3 and said, love this channel. Thank you, Timothy. But here was the interesting one that I referred to a few minutes ago. Lama Dirk giving $10. Thank you very much. Very interesting question. My carrier was deeply involved in the bombing of Serbia in 1999. Nobody knew what we were doing there, including the admirals, besides building Clinton's legacy. Can you ask Slav the long-term impact in regards to Islamic intrusion in the Balkans? This is fascinating, and thank you again, Lama Dirk. We have someone that was actually in the United States military that was part of the strike on Serbia, super chatting and participating in this chat. This is amazing.
Yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah, this is a very monumental super chat. Can you, and thank you for this. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your honesty.
Yes.
Again, the question is, can you ask Slav the long-term impact in regards to Islamic intrusion in the Balkans?
Absolutely. So, I mean, as you may be aware, the whole remove kebab meme that essentially started in Serbia with reference to, removing Muslims and Islamification and rejecting Islamification. So Serbia has, for 1,400 years now, essentially been at war with Islam. It started with the Turks. We had several uprisings where we defeated the Turks or kept the Turks at bay, essentially. And more recently, in the Balkan Wars of the 90s, what had happened essentially was that the U.S. and obviously other groups were arming some of the neocons, were arming some of the terrorists in Bosnia, some of the Islamic terrorists in Bosnia, and providing them with arms and essentially just providing the gunpowder for the entire situation to erupt. And in these groups, or this group particularly, was called the Mujahideen. They were essentially the ISIS of the Balkans. They were cutting off heads, doing all these gruesome things back then. And in 1999, what had happened essentially with Kosovo was the same thing. We had Serbian churches in Kosovo, which is now its own independent country as of 2008. We had Serbian churches in Kosovo being desecrated by radical Albanian Muslims. They were destroying Serbian cemeteries, burning Serbian houses, and essentially destroying Kosovo. Kosovo used to be a predominantly Serbian enclave, and then because of mass Islamic immigration from Albania, it completely shifted. So Serbs became essentially the minority in Kosovo. Albanians became the majority, and the Albanian Muslims terrorized the Serbs in these areas, and obviously the Serbs fought back. And that's exactly how this whole conflict started in 1999, when NATO came to intervene and save the poor Muslims. And what's interesting is that a lot of people in the U.S. and in the Army and the Navy who I've spoken to, who did go to Kosovo, they had no idea what they were doing down there. They had no idea, who they were supposed to. They had no idea to the background of the situation, who they were there to protect, what their missions were, and many of them said the same thing. They arrived to Kosovo and they saw the situation, and it sort of woke them up. They realized that that Serbs were the ones who were being persecuted, and essentially that NATO, its allies, the UN, had essentially turned its back on the Serbian minority in Kosovo, and had radicalized these Islamists who were torching houses, destroying villages, organ trafficking, and doing all these horrendous things to Serbians in Kosovo. Now, in terms of Islamization in the future in the Balkans, it's not looking too good for us. I mean, we now have areas of Bosnia that have been bought up by the Saudis, where they're essentially starting up their own gated communities, where they have their mosques, and they basically have these towns. And if you Google ISIS in the Balkans, Bosnia, there's still active ISIS members and terror cells in Bosnia to this day. And obviously everybody turns a blind eye, primarily because the UN and these people, they benefit from the instability in the nation and in having these little terror cells. And secondly, also because these people do have pretty advanced and very strong lobbies in the region as well. And they are financed by Saudi Arabia, and they're buying up these massive plots of land around Serbia and around Bosnia. So the situation in Serbia has not really changed for the last 1400 years. It's sort of a cyclical battle.
Right, with the Ottomans being in that area of the world, and Eastern Europeans have put up with a lot, being the gates of Europe between the rest of Europe and the Islamic world. And we have to keep that in mind, remember that. Do you think that kind of, this person, again, this was a fantastic historical super chat, that someone who was on an aircraft carrier in this 1999 in the Clinton era sent in this question. Do you think that was part of a proto situation that but was part of the ultimate plan that we're seeing unfolding with the migrant invasion now? Like, what's your big picture take on all this, with who's behind it, and is Europe, has there been a long-term plan in your estimation from what you've studied to destroy Europe?
Yeah, it has been, absolutely. And just to add on to what you said, regarding the geographical position of Serbia, and especially Kosovo, being sort of the gate between the Middle East and Europe. When NATO came in there to Kosovo, they set up their air bases, and essentially they used it as a drug trafficking route to import heroin and other hard drugs from the Middle East up through Kosovo and into the rest of Europe. So they essentially use Albania and Kosovo as these narco states that they could use to sort of traffic narcotics into the rest of Europe. Now, within regards to Islamification, as in the bigger picture, it definitely was part of the plan. It was a part of the plan to weaken that region, to create instability in that region, so that they could sort of test the waters to see what would happen in the future. Say if a migrant crisis began, and if they had to leave people in this region, would the Serbs tolerate this? Would they be intolerant towards Muslims? How would we react? And obviously we haven't reacted too well. If you go back to Serbia, the general consensus is that we don't want these people to stay here. We don't want them in Serbia. So that war was sort of a precursor to everything that's happening right now. But as I said previously, this region is very, very unstable. There are active terror cells working in the region. ISIS is very active there. It has its terror cells. It receives funding there. So things, if they do get enough power, and if we let them get enough power, it certainly won't go in our advantage.
Yeah, I have another couple of comments to read, and then I'll turn it over to Jason with anything, if he has more super chats and questions. The first is our beautiful moderator, Dainty Brighton, who is here today. Hello, Dainty. It's great to see you. Sadinsky and everyone else helping out. Dainty caught something from the regular chat, and she sent it to me in a Twitter DM, and I'd just like to read this and give a quick moment of respect for this person. Alexandra S., thank you for sharing this personal, heart-wrenching bit of information. My uncle was killed by a jihadi in Bosnia, age 19, beheaded. So Alexandra, thank you for sharing that, and you have our heartfelt support. Let's everyone just have a moment for this, for Alexandra's uncle. Again, thank you for that. And we do have a super chat, again, by way of my Streamlabs, which we appreciate you using. And if you're listening in the replay, you can always use Streamlabs. We don't have to be streaming. It's just a way to donate. Unknown Californian gives $20. Thank you so much. Love all of you guys. So great to see Slav on the show. I just finished listening to This Week on the Alt-Right with Lana and Henrik. Of course, we did that 2 days ago on Wednesday. Most excellent episode, as this one is. Thank you very much. Speaking of This Week on the Alt-Right, we saw our very good friend and colleague Mark Collette in the chat. Mark, if you're still listening, great to see you. And also Poseidon is here. And we had Slav, a very similar conversation with Poseidon, him being in Greece, about being in that area of the world and seeing the flow of the so-called migrants coming up, and him even reporting that there are people who fly in from other parts of the world, from the Caribbean, in our hemisphere, in Latin America, who fly into Turkey, say they're Middle Eastern, and walk into Europe. It is an absurd situation. And Poseidon, of course, does a lot of great work exposing that. But I'll turn it back over to you guys and see where you'd like to go next. I do have some more questions about Russia and identity, but I just want to make sure that we have some super chats or anything Jason wants to address.
Yes, let's jump on over to a super chat by Billahora. Super chatting with $10. Thank you most kindly for that super chat. He writes, Squatting Slav, as an American of Slavic heritage, I'm sick with rage and shame for what the United States neocons did against Serbia. And then he writes, Slava Srpski Brat as well. I assume that has something to do with brother and your country. But so we have a lot of people here. In fact, we've had a couple now mention that have Slavic heritage. I, of course, have a little bit of predominantly Northwest European, German, English, Scandinavian, but I have all of Eastern European running through my veins, Russian, and even a little bit of Southern European as well. So there's a lot of support for Serbia, a lot of support for Eastern Europe, and we've been talking about that. And I want to get back to that, but for a moment, if we could take at the top of the hour here a little exit off of this highway, we can come back to it. And I'd like to talk about a little bit lighter material, some of these engagements you've had out on the street with some of the freakiest anti-whites, some of the most rabid, some of the most insane. I know that some of them would entertain your questions at first. I remember watching these videos, and then when they would figure out that you weren't one of them and you weren't going to just continue this sort of anti-white lie, and you were asking questions that were difficult to answer, then they would quickly run around like little tattletales to each other, saying, "This guy, watch out! He's trouble." So, any of those stories, any of those encounters that were hilarious, that were stupefying, that were ignoble on their part, please share.
I mean, with these protests and these rallies, it's always the same formula with these people. You have a lot of trouble engaging them. You have a lot of trouble getting any kind of constructive discussions out of them. And once in a while you'll get lucky. Someone will say a few things before labeling you a Nazi. But it's usually a very, very short-lived, unproductive discussion dominated by a lot of autistic screeching. The funniest experience I had was probably at the very first rally that I ever went to back in February of 2017. They announced over the loudspeaker that I was with Rebel Media and that I was there to incite hate with them, and that I was essentially the enemy. And before this, I had managed to get a few interviews, and as soon as that announcement was made, nobody wanted to speak to me. And if you watch that video back from 2017, you'll actually see people just sort of scattering off like roaches as soon as I approach them. And as you guys are aware, this is because these people, they're almost in a cult-like state of mind. 90% of them have no idea what they're even protesting. A lot of them are paid by various NGOs, to come out and protest with these ridiculous signs and sort of Lord of the Rings style outfits. And yeah, it's like I said. I mean, it's always the same thing. And in Canada, it seems to be the sort of the protest environment seems to be a lot more peaceful than it does, in the U.S. In places like Texas or even Berkeley, and a lot more peaceful than places like Germany, where an Antifa comes with an army of 500 people with weapons, essentially, there to do harm. So I've never had any problems, and I mean, if someone does try anything to me, well, George Soros will be paying their hospital bills.
So I think Jared and I were discussing. In fact, I know Jared had mentioned that in some of his research, he had ascertained that you had not been in a physical altercation at the point that this information was shared, but we were curious about whether or not you have been since that point in any sort of physical altercation with any of these anti-whites. Has there been, not necessarily a fight, but have they? Sometimes we see they'll sort of bunch up and they'll use their body weight to push you back, and I guess their malodorous stench emanating from their bodies to sort of force you back. Have they tried this on you before? Because I don't recall seeing that in any of your videos. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just also jump in really quick. If you haven't liked the stream, please do. Please tweet. Please share on Gab, Facebook, Minds. Share with your circles of influence so that we can get this info out there, especially when we have a guest like Squatting Slave that so many people just like. He's a likable guy. He's very entertaining and informative at the same time. And he does, aside from, there's so many vacuous content producers on YouTube that are able to just, they're parvenus. They've come up to the microphone. They say a few things that others are saying, but really there's nothing to these people. Slav actually has a brain to back up all of his antics, a brain to back up the arguments that he makes. So it's more than just basic entertainment, and you've seen that on display as we've been discussing these different topics with him tonight. Your typical antic thrower that we've seen on so many different channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, they have nothing really substantive to say. They just want to put on some brainless, sort of witless, empty-headed content so that you can just escape your real world. That escapism is no better than these other escapism artists that we were discussing earlier. So yeah, please make sure you get this out. And a big aspect of that is just clicking the like button. We have a very nicely sized audience, but not nearly as many likes. So if you haven't done that, please do so now. And I'll also jump in with a super chat. I think that's Karfpizan, $5 super chat. One of these days, white liberals running on behalf of minorities will have to hand over their government jobs to non-whites to atone for their racism. Absolutely. They absolutely will. And they already have been. I mean, one of the things that we had happen in this country for a great many decades, and Jared, George, and I have talked about this, is that you had the white collar people that were able to go ahead and signal that they were anti-white by saying, oh, let in all of these laborers, these blue collar laborers, these people who will sheetrock your home or lay the pavement on your driveway. And the reason why was because these white collar workers weren't in direct competition for their jobs. There wasn't a skill set match for them. So they sat up on their high horses and they lectured the rest of us in the country saying,
I hope their houses fall apart.
So what's that now?
I hope their houses fall apart if they were made by people.
That's actually happening. I mean, for those of us like myself who, I've worked both blue collar and white collar jobs. And I've gotten to see when you bring in third world standards and people, you get third world outcomes. That's why we see things like walkways falling down and crushing cars and killing people, bridges falling apart, etc. So yeah, now we see that these white collar families who used to, who were able to, they were immune. They were behind, in effect, like gated communities, even though the majority of them didn't have gated communities. They, in effect, were protected by walls. Now we're seeing and have seen their jobs challenged and taken and stolen. And suddenly it's I'm being tasked with training my Indian replacement. Well, oh well, buddy. You were the one who were saying who were saying that it was fine that the carpenters who were coming in, and fine that the bricklayers were coming in from El Salvador and Ecuador, and now you're going to complain. Well, now we're all complaining. It's time to just make amends and no longer turn on each other. We really have to accept the reality that we can't stratify our people as, those who are white collar and those who are blue collar, those who have a college degree and those who don't have a college degree. Every job for the community has as much dignity in it as any other job in the community. If you collect the trash, that job has as much dignity as any other job in the community. You are as valuable as any other participant in the community, period. We will not allow ourselves to be fractured this way again. So I see Way of the World is in the audience. I just want to make sure everybody gets a look at this cup that I have here, because for some reason the coffee is always better in this cup. It always tastes a lot better. I don't know why, but I did want to say hello to Way of the World. I don't know if there's a connection there or not. But I have been, Slav, in these encounters and arguments. Of course, I worked on the Hill. So I saw a bunch of these different types, these rotund, these orbicular SJWs standing on the street corner saying, don't objectify my body. And all I could think is, well, objectify for what? For in the place of what is that Epicac? Would I objectify you in the place of Epicac to induce vomiting if I've drank poison? I mean, what would be the point of objectifying your body? But nonetheless, I mean, they were there all the time. And for folks who
on your construction site movie,
yes, and for people who don't know, when you see these big protests in DC, very often what they're doing is what appears to be a big protest, and I assume they're able to do it less now since everybody has a camera on their phone. But back in the day, we didn't, and they would have like seriously half a dozen, 10 of these anti-whites, these of various names that they call themselves, feminists, SJWs, what have you. They would have 10, and they would march them in a tight oval. So you would see people going from left to right, right to left, and then the news cameras, all of them, the major networks, would zoom in on a really tight portion of that oval. So it seemed like there were just masses of people up at the protest, when in reality, it was just a handful of the sickliest people you've ever seen in your life, whose opinions you shouldn't give a damn about. So, and this is some of the stuff that Slav has had to wade into. I assume taken just very healthy and hot showers after he's gotten away from these people. But one of these days, if the folks would like it, I would like this very much. If we can make it happen. Slav is on the other side of the continent, but this is something we would be great to make happen. I would love to go with Slav to one of these SJW protests and get out there, and maybe Slav and I, so we won't be recognized. He of course is more likely to be recognized than me. Maybe we'll put on purple wigs or something like this and then head out into this crowd, and maybe our first couple questions will be endorsements, or maybe that's what we'll do, Slav. We'll actually take their ideas to an even absurd level. We'll just go as far as we can with it. But let me ask you this, in regard to, maybe I don't want to spoil any of your future plans because this is hilarious. Do you have some more ideas for for going out and talking with these people? What kind of stunts might you try to pull off when talking with them? And fortunately, as Slav pointed out, it's actually it's a much better environment to do this sort of thing where he is and up in Canada than it is in some place like southern United States or maybe Germany, where you can get stabbed and then the local authorities are going to fine you for staining the pavement with your blood and the power washing to get rid of your blood. So do you have any ideas for the future? And then also to my previous question, Have they ever tried to intimidate you by force of stench, or by force of girth and weight? Have they ever tried to intimidate you that way?
Well, thanks, Patrick. You just blew, or sorry, Jason, you just blew my cover. I actually wanted to do that for a long time. I wanted to dress up, wear a wig, a purple wig, put on some ridiculous glasses and some skinny jeans and a lisp, and have a lisp, and go out there and and try to fit in and see what kind of information I can get out of them. Because now when I go to these things, obviously they recognize me off the bat. And there's usually one designated retard who goes around and tells the others not to engage with me. I'll always see this one little troll walking around whispering to everyone else, pointing at me, right? So I try to get my interviews in, before this person, spreads the information about me. Now, in terms of, any kind of physical contact or any kind of physical threats, I've really had nothing. I've had these people stand in front of me, hold hands, and build walls. And I admit I try to egg them on sometimes, to see if they'll throw a punch or anything like that. Sometimes I do want them to try, but no, nothing. I mean, they're scared. This is when I go in there, I'm essentially invading their safe space. Right. I've been to protests where they ask people to turn off their cell phones because the ringing cell phones are detrimental to these snowflakes. I've had I've heard all kinds of ridiculous things in these perceived safe spaces that they create, and then when I show up with a cameraman, they're absolutely terrified. So they sort of stand their ground, and I've never really had any problems. And like I said, if I do have any problems, they'll get dealt with very, very swiftly. I have no hesitation in fighting back. And I know that, a lot of people on the right condone fighting, and, they encourage using our words, etc., etc. But this doesn't work when someone's assaulting you and, trying to punch you in the face. So to all the people out there, if you are in these types of situations, handle them. If you go to protests, you have to know what to expect.
Right. They will absolutely attack you without question. We've seen that countless times, and that is not hyperbole to use the word countless. I just had an idea while you were talking. What we could do would just be fantastic. Do you remember, both of you in the audience, do you remember, it wasn't that long ago, there was this safe space closet that was put up at a university in the cafeteria? You remember this? Chad, do you remember this?
I remember seeing that in the school, yeah.
Yeah, it was at a university. Somebody built this safe space closet that you go in, and it had rules on it, like please no longer than 10 minutes, because there will be other little special snowflakes that need to get out of the offensive environment of, I don't know, perhaps it was eating meat or something. Who knows what it could be. They saw somebody with a haircut maybe like mine, and so that was enough to cause them to break down. Oh no, it was called the cry closet. Wasn't that what it was called? Folks, do you remember this? Wasn't it called the cry closet?
So, I don't want it to be true, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, so here's my idea, Slav. This is what we do. We construct a cry closet out of cardboard, so it's nice and easy and portable. And we show up at one of these events dressed up like these snowflakes. And then we set this cry closet up as something that's legitimate. And we go out there and we videotape them saying that, look, we've built the cry closet so that if anything becomes too stressful, you can go inside the cry closet. If we could get somebody to go inside the cry closet, that would be absolute gold. I'll tell you, right, that would be just ultimate gold.
Maybe you can repurpose a porta potty.
Yeah, that's a kind of
put some lights on outside. I like the idea of pushing them even further, acting like you're one of them and being like, you know what? Desmond is amazing, should be president now. Yeah. Like, even as a 12-year-old,
yes,
I think Desmond is amazing, should be president. That would be the most woke thing you could do, right, brothers and sisters? I think there's something to explore there. Well, I saw some more super chats come through before we get on to another topic, a bunch. So we thank you for that. And if Jason wants to read.
Yeah, let's get to some of these. Roy Danton, super chatting $9.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. So inspiring and motivating to listen to Tap while working out on the treadmill. Amazing discussion today. Absolutely. Stay in shape, folks. If you're not in shape, get in shape. Jared and I are going to be doing some health and wellness streams in the future, not too distant future. We'll have Slav on. He's in fantastic shape. We'll have Mark Collette come on with us as well. We'll be talking about different things, working out, eating, etc. So stay in shape. If you are in shape, get in shape. If you are not in shape, Steve Bin Bob super chatting with £2. Thank you very much for that super chat. Didn't write anything, but we appreciate it. Let's see. Who else did we have? We had a couple slip on by. Blatant Arrogance super chatting with $10. Not sure if you can get as absurd as them. People have tried before. Well, we'll if we get out there and call for Desmond is amazing for president. I don't know if we could get a chant going. If we could get a chant going and have people actually turn out for that, have them shouting Desmond for president, we'd really have something going. But yeah, Jared, if you want to go ahead and jump into, did we get any super chats by way of Streamlabs?
We don't have any new ones by way of Streamlabs, but again, we do encourage that more gets to your resident content creators and our guest here, as we do on Tap when we have a big interview, like we are with Squatting Slav. And of course, if you're listening in the replay, Streamlabs, as long as I still have it, always works. If not, we'll have other ways in the description to donate. We will be flexible, and we ask you to be flexible with us. Remember, it's not about the platform. It's about the community and the content creators. So anyway, Slav, I have a question for you. Do you feel that Canada at this point is a totalitarian state?
I think it's getting there, and very rapidly. And a perfect example of this is Faith Goldie's mayoral campaign, who I don't really support anymore. But I mean, during this whole campaign and this entire fiasco, we sort of saw what happens to people with a different political opinion in Canada, and to people who represent a different value system, or who have different ideologies to their names. So yeah, Canada is definitely heading there. I mean, leftists control the media here. There's no doubt about that. And we have this new with the UN migrant plan that they're unrolling right now in Canada. They're sort of unrolling this whole new censorship initiative as well, where the dinosaur media is essentially going to filter through and regulate any anti-migrant or any anti-refugee content. So there's definitely big moves happening in Canada towards a totalitarian.
I think it broke up for a second, but it seems like you're done. Yeah, that's crazy. And we see the same thing happening again in a lot of European countries where it is illegal, or they're trying to make it illegal, even to question what's going on with the migrants, which is crazy. I understand Trudeau is in a bit of hot water as well with some kind of scandal. I don't know all the details on that, but I know some people are calling for Trudeau to resign. It's interesting to see that development. What about, you were both talking about the street protests before, and your recent videos have people in yellow vests in Vancouver, and you speak to them. They feel some kind of solidarity with the yellow vest movement in Europe, and they actually speak to you, and they are intelligent. They know a little bit about what's going on. They can present themselves. The contrast is stark when you try to speak to the SJWs and the snowflakes. But what about the yellow vest movement in general? Do you have any thoughts on that and why it's resonating with some people in Canada?
Well, in France, the yellow vest movement essentially started in a revolt to the hike in gas prices, but it encompasses a whole variety of different issues. People are sick and tired of their globalist governments essentially wrecking their nations. They're sick and tired of the banks, destroying them. And this is resonating with people, with the average person, with the average working class person all across the world. And I think we're going to see more and more of these yellow vest protests and these little uprisings happening all across the West, all across Europe, all across North America. And I'm actually glad. That there is a yellow vest movement in Vancouver, and now a very large one as well in all of Canada. I mean, the Facebook group, the Yellow Vest Facebook group alone, has 108,000 people in it here in Canada. And recently, they've been the Trudeau government has been doing everything in its power to take this group off of Facebook and to censor it and to demonize it. They were saying that they found threats against Trudeau being written up in the group on Facebook, and they're doing everything in their power to dismantle the movement and fragment it and sort of shove it under the rug. But I think it's only due to grow more and more, and that's exactly what we see happening. I mean, in Vancouver, it started off with a few people. Now it's got 100 or more people in it, and all across Canada, it's a movement with hundreds and thousands of people, because these very same issues that are afflicting Europe are afflicting people in Canada here as well. Hikes in gas prices, things like the carbon tax, migration. These are all very pressing questions that average white working class people are sort of feeling the pressure of everywhere in the world.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that really speaks to the opportunity that we have now, which is unique and in our lifetimes. I mean, there's nobody really alive at the moment that it was alive at a time when there was so much disenchantment with the authority figures, the authority entities across the West. So typically white people, we are just genetically predisposed to order. And this is why I say that even if our average IQ were 90 rather than 100 or whatever, I know there are different debates, but even if it were, say, 90, we still have this inclination to order. We still have this inclination to discipline and to peace. And so we would still build prosperous Western civilizations. They might not be as advanced, technologically advanced as what we have, but we would still build peaceful civilizations, safe civilizations. Now, what does this mean? What it means is that it's once a corrupt regime gets into power, they're able to maintain that power for a long time because of our willingness to obey the authority structures, our willingness to get in line when it comes to authority and maintain that peace, maintain that harmony. But these authority structures, the church, the governments, the universities, they have been so thoroughly debunked after decade of this moral posturing, this self-righteousness, always being wrong when it comes to what you actually see in your life, giving you something in entertainment that is totally different than what we see in the real world, that people are now beginning to rescind that that allegiance, rescind that respect that they have to these entities. That is what's really fueling these folks. And that means that there's an opportunity here. This is not just like another, protesters march over folks who were, I can remember the stories about, what were they called? The something marchers. It'll come back to me in the US, where the United States government actually fired on the citizens, and people rarely talk about this. It's talked about so little that I can't even recall the name of it, but they were veterans that marched in Washington, D.C., and then the troops came out and fired on these veterans, killing veterans of previous wars. Oh, the name almost just came back to me. The point being that this is not just another one-off. This is an absolute loss of faith in these authority entities in our civilization. And therefore, our people are looking for answers elsewhere. That's very dangerous for the regime. That means the regime realizes that their ability to control the thinking and therefore control the actions of those many scores of millions is slipping out of their fingers. Evidence that they know that that is the case is the increasing censorship that we see across all of platforms. Everywhere we see these new laws going up saying that you can't criticize a certain group of people. You can't criticize a certain country that the certain group of people pledge their allegiance to. You have to have all of these speech codes now. All of that is evidence of the fact that they know that they're losing control over the thoughts of these people because reality conflicts too much with their artificial narrative. So seeing this yellow vest movement spread from France to Germany and to Canada, especially the leap to Canada, was very exciting for me to see that happen, because it crossing the Atlantic and appearing on another continent is something more than just a demonstration of people who are upset. That is a show of unity that is deeper than just those yellow vests or just a disagreement with a particular program or a particular policy that the government is implementing. It is a show of solidarity of our kind. Now, whether or not the people who are throwing on those vests will be brave enough to say that to the media or brave enough to say that to their family members is a different question. But they nonetheless have come to a robust expression of implicit whiteness, which is how I see the yellow vest movement. So it's great. I think you did a great job describing and detailing exactly what's happening with the yellow vest. And what do you think, actually, on that same subject? Are we going to be seeing more of these yellow vest movements? Have you heard any talk up in protests, rather? Have you heard any talk in Canada of that? Especially since Canada, in a lot of ways, is, well, let me rephrase this, in some ways is behind the US in its totalitarian nature, and in other ways is way ahead of the US in its totalitarian nature. So what have you heard? What's on the grapevine?
Well, just based off of what I'm seeing on an everyday basis, in the Facebook groups that I've been added to, the numbers are increasing exponentially by the day, and there's more and more people posting in these groups by the day. I'm seeing more and more events being organized on a weekly basis as well. So I don't see this movement stopping at all. I think it's gaining momentum right now. It's actually just starting to gain momentum in Canada. As we know, in Paris and the rest of France, it's been going steadily now for I think it's going into its 14th week right now. So that alone is testament to the fact of how determined these people are, and how genuine this cause is, and how closely it hits people. So I think that in Canada we're just going to be seeing more and more on this, and I already see the mainstream media and the liberal government absolutely terrified of this movement growing and gaining momentum, because all of a sudden you have unity between your average white working class citizens. For the first time in a long time, you have this unifying cause that has some real potential to do some damage and to really expand and grow. And we're seeing what's happening in France. Emmanuel Macron is essentially hiding because he's powerless, and that's exactly what the elite fears the most. They fear that people will unify in massive numbers and push the elite into a corner where they have no choice but to surrender.
We certainly do feel the wind at our back and something changing. People seeing these people for what they are, traitors. They're not protecting their people. They're not of the people. I have a couple of super chats from Streamlabs. Again, thank you. That is the preferred way, even though we appreciate any donations. Sin526, a regular listener, $10. Hello, Jared. And I'm sure that extends to Jason as well. Slav is a fantastic, in all caps, fantastic guest. And I'm thrilled that you got him on the show, as are we. I remember he was one of the first people I started paying attention to during the great meme war of 2016. Keep up the great work, and may God give you all wings. Well, I do believe we are flying high, and Slav, that's a nice tribute to you, that you were one of the most influential people on Sin526. And then Phoenix Fire, another good friend of the show, giving $5. Thank you very much. I love the Slav. I get blackpilled like so many of us do sometimes, and it's important to laugh every day. Thumbs up. That is true. We have to keep each other in good spirits as well. And Slav does give a great mix of information, but also entertainment and something that we can enjoy. That's important. I have a question for you, Slav, on a different angle, but still based on that same thing that started our yellow vest conversation over the last 15 minutes or so, of you being out there amongst the people and the crazy protesters. When you see these people that I referred to again, where they don't even talk to you, they just literally, if any of you people watching in the chat haven't seen this, go to Slav's channel and watch where he'll ask some honest questions and they'll start chanting. One woman will start chanting, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is what we do when someone asks us this. It's like, immigration is good, open up the borders, whatever their little clever thing is. And you just see the programming. What do you've seen it firsthand. Do you think that there is some kind of a separation in our people? Like there are some people who maybe they're, however you want to conceive of it, their genes, their spirit, however you want to say it, they're just here to be copiers. And if they're going to copy something that's suicidal, then they're going in a different direction, and we're at a juncture, a bottleneck in the history of the European peoples and the white people. And the people like us are the people who want to be here, and we value our heritage, and we will survive. How do you square all that? What's going through your head when you see how these people are zombies?
Well, the reality is that we've always been, from the beginning of time, programmed to be either leaders or followers. And obviously, there are a lot more followers out there than there are leaders. I think this is just, a case of biology and natural selection, obviously. There can't be, too many leaders, too many alphas. There have to be more followers. But yeah, I mean, these people at these protests are your typical, NPCs. They have a script. They, like I said earlier, they don't know what they're protesting, and they have a script. They're told what to say. They have, a few chants that just sort of switch on whenever they feel threatened or unable to respond to any arguments. And yeah, I mean, when you look into their eyes, it's almost like you're staring into a robot. There's absolutely no sparkle in their eyes. Most of them, it's almost as if they're soulless, and they can just stand there and look at you straight in the face, almost without even moving. They don't even twitch a muscle. And I've noticed, I mean, and if you look around, like if you're someone who watches these, anti-SJW videos of SJWs at protests, you'll see that these people all resemble each other. They all look like they could be one gigantic retarded family. They have the same physical features, most of them. They have these glasses, and they're shaped the same facial structures. Their voices are the same. So I mean, this is something that I've always asked myself. It's like, what predisposes these people to look and act this way? Is it naturally? Like, are they just followers? Are they soy boys and these beta males who don't work out, so they all end up looking physically similar, like like an assembly line of robots? Or is there more to it? Or is it the programming, the environment, and the things that they're being told that that shape the way that they look, that shape the way that they speak? I honestly want to believe that it's sort of a combination of both factors. But it's amazing how similar these people look. I mean, watch a few videos tonight, guys, of various protests. Take a protest somewhere in UC Berkeley. Take one of my videos. These people, they could be a family. I swear to God, some of them look identical. And I think this is largely due to the fact that they're brainwashed into thinking this way, into speaking this way, and this reflects on how they how they look physically as well, and vice versa. So there's definitely a connection between both, and it's from the time that I started going to these rallies 2 years ago.
Let me jump in really quick, folks. And also, if you're going to watch any of these videos of someone confronting SJWs, make sure you go to this man's channel and watch his videos, and then share those videos, because you don't need to be spreading some Civnats videos of him going out and talking to these folks or some alt-light person. Watch Slav's videos, spread his videos to your circles of influence. Now we have a couple of super chats here. Berisha, $10 super chat. Thank you very much. In case you guys organize something out there, watch out for the neurotic sumo feminists and trannies. Well, be careful. I'm sure I'll definitely wear a cup to make sure, because I know that's where they always want to go with their, whether it's to injure me or because they have some strong desires. We also have Stephen Blob donated £5 through Super Chat. Brexit, betrayed by the elites in the UK. There are some very angry people here in the UK who have now lost any faith in politics. Indeed, and I fear for what's going to happen there. And I'm going to mention really quick what I was speaking to a moment ago, because it's very relevant for everyone who thinks about your run-of-the-mill political force or some sort of political force or physical force against the government. What I mentioned a moment ago, and Bill of Horror helped me recall what it was called. These were World War I veterans in the United States, veterans of the Great War, the war that was going to end all wars. These were veterans in a much healthier America too, by the way, that had been promised bonuses and they were not given them. So they got together, they were called the Bonus Marchers, and they brought their families and they marched on Washington, D.C. And the federal government of the United States broke out the army and tanks and machine guns and machine gunned those people. So when you think about your little idea of some folks out there think about you're going to get in pickup trucks and they don't stand a chance, remember the Bonus Marchers. Remember when a group of veterans of the Great War decided that they were going to march and forcibly get the government to give them the money that the government had promised them, that the government broke out tanks and machine guns. So keep that in mind. And I fear now that when I mention that, I fear now for what could happen in the UK, because the last thing we need is for people to decide we're just going to bum rush Parliament or something of this nature because you can't get your way. Remember that those who are in power did not get there by way of being imbecilic. They didn't get there by way of being so moral that they would never harm a fly. They will murder you if need be. So we have to be smarter than that. We have to be smarter than them. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Jared, were there any other super chats by way of Streamlabs? I didn't know if you had.
The Streamlabs coffers are currently empty. Okay. But yeah, I would say Slav, I agree with your assessment. It's a fascinating topic. I mean, this could be a whole stream in and of itself if we wanted to research it. There is a chicken and egg thing going on. Obviously, there's part of our people where we are more prone to being empathetic. There are certain people among the European population especially that are prone to that empathy and that projection. However, there are many things in modern life, both ideas and also physical products, food, water, being tainted and contaminated, that are conspiring to take those kinds of people and pervert those instincts and make them these monstrous versions of that. And so they have this religion of this suicidal altruism, as is often discussed. But anyway, I have more of a fun question, and I don't know if this is more off the cuff. You might have a lot to say, you might not have a lot to say, but it is interesting. We do hear a lot about, for a variety of reasons, as we were discussing earlier, Eastern Europe, it's more traditional. So in Eastern Europe, in the Slavic areas of Europe, we were curious to hear a little more about everyone's favorite subject, the relations between men and women. And if you could tell us anything about courtship and romance and marriage there, and the roles of the genders, and a healthier, more traditional expression of that contrasted to some of the Western degeneracy. So lay that at your feet, however you'd like to explore that with us.
Well, this is going to break a lot of people's hearts and possibly blackpill a lot of people. Who think that, you know, Eastern Europe is this bastion of tradition, and especially when it comes, you know, to relationships and women. The truth is, if, you know, in major cities in Eastern Europe, you know, in Serbia, in Belgrade, or the women are not too much different than than they are here in North America. If you really want to find a good woman, a family-oriented woman who's going to want to have children, and, you know, assert the more traditional stay-at-home motherly role, you do have to go into smaller towns or into the countryside to find this, because, you know, while Serbia, I think it has some of the most beautiful women in the world, and I encourage people, guys, I encourage you to go there just to witness this phenomenon for yourselves. You will break your neck in Serbia looking at the women, their models. But at the same time, no joke. Like, if you think Lauren Southern is a 10 out of 10, you're out to lunch. Okay, you need to go to Serbia and see these Eastern European women. Okay, they're models. Now, that being said,
okay? Would you be upset if us American guys were there talking up?
No, you guys will come with me.
Do we get a pass? Do we get a pass because we're traditional kinds of guys and we're pro-white?
You know what? Once again, I mean, if you're in these big cities and you're an American tourist, the women, all they look for is money.
Yeah. There's like I'm sure a lot of them are out at clubs, dance music and rap music. I'm sure that happens there too.
Yes, because Belgrade, the capital city of Serbia, is notorious for its nightlife. You know, the city doesn't sleep. Sunday to Monday, or sorry, all week straight, you basically have clubs and cafes open all day and all night from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning, and they're always packed. You know, people don't work, but yet somehow the clubs are always packed. I still don't understand this phenomenon. But all of this stuff aside, you know, the women in the big cities, they're very brainwashed by the entire cultural Marxist agenda, by the Kardashians and all these other poisonous TV stars. So in Eastern Europe, if you want to find a good wife there, I suggest going to the countryside, and that's where you'll find women who still know how to cook, who want to have children, and all this good stuff that that guys like us look for. But don't kid yourselves thinking that Eastern Europe is this a bastion of tradition, where every woman is a virgin and just has her head wrapped up waiting for you to come and marry her. It's just not like that. You really have to go to the small towns. But I do feel that women there in general are a lot more organic. They're very open. They'll if they want to tell you something, if they want to express their feelings, they won't beat around the bush. They'll tell you very openly how they feel. And in North America, I find that people and women especially are much more hesitant to sort of openly say things. They'll sort of go mute instead of openly telling you how they feel or what they want. In Eastern Europe, women are a lot more direct. So that's actually a very great thing, because you always know what people want. You don't have to second guess yourself.
Yeah, that's quite a difference from this always having to attempt to interpret what she means when she's not saying a word, and maybe looking a certain way at the ceiling or the floor. This is the sort of thing we grow up with in the States, that you have to be able to read the mind, or there's something wrong with you. Can't you tell that something? But and this is exactly, I'm glad you spoke to this. I'm glad Jared asked. I'm glad you spoke to this, because it was just a couple of weeks ago, Jared. I don't know if you remember, and I was talking about how you're just as likely to find a tainted woman, tainted with anti-whiteism in Eastern Europe, in Russia, as you are the States, and you're just as likely to find a good woman in Eastern Europe or Russia as you are the States. So this was, remember, Jared, we were talking about specifically advice to young men on that stream, and where they can find a wife, and what kind of expectations can they have. And I even shared what we all know, I guess many of us know. And that's not to say that there haven't been guys from the States who have gone and not found wonderful women, and they come back and they have splendid families. They do. I've seen that as well. But in the States here, we've also seen men who have some money. They go over to Eastern Europe or Russia. They get some absolute, like Slav is talking about, where, you know, they're in a neck brace for 6 months after they return to the States from just walking down one city block. They come back with a knockout. And then within the first year and a half or so, she divorces him. As soon as she's here, an American citizen, she realizes she can have somebody richer, better looking, prettier face, and that's it. She's gone. And then she takes half of everything he has. So we've seen that more often than not. So you be careful about where you're going to look for people. But I think it's really great because Slav just absolutely verified what I was saying in my advice to those young men. And I'll also say this: Jared and I are already putting together our itinerary to travel with Slav to Estonia and Serbia and these countries. So we've already begun drawing that up. So maybe we'll do some videos from over there as well.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's the same basics everywhere. You have a much tougher time of it in the cities. We have a lot of this degenerate club culture that is going to be a magnet for very shallow, material-minded people. I have not been to Eastern Europe. I've been to Europe, but not to Eastern Europe. And so, admittedly, this is just on hearsay, and this might be kind of a superficial way to do it, but I'll hear people that have traveled there, even Ramsey Paul, who's often in Budapest, Hungary. I think he lives there part of the year, does comment that he just sees, in terms of couples, it's much more common to see young couples with more than one or two kids, bigger, healthier, brighter white families. Again, in his experience, it's particularly in Hungary. But I was just curious about I put it to you and you answered however you wanted, but that was kind of the direction I was going in, that I guess comparing apples to apples, at least comparing the kinds of people that want families. We all know there's degenerate club culture in the cities everywhere across the whole world. On that topic, what about, I know we don't have too much time left, but you kind of hinted at this before. And again, I listened to a little of your interview with the Russian gentleman when I was looking for some, I don't know what I typed in, maybe just Squatting Slav interview, and this came up. What is your conception? You mentioned the civilizational difference of, kind of in the vein of Dugin, of the Atlantic Anglo-American thing, and then this Eurasian principle. Do you have any thoughts on that socially and politically? Does that mean anything to you? Do you think it's a meaningful distinction? I don't know much about it myself, so I don't have some kind of well-crafted question. I have more to learn. But I know it's something that's come up, and you seem to be hinting at it before, so I wanted to mention it as well.
Well, in terms of Duginism and the way the dynamics of of Europe in particular right now, I do think that there is this rejection of, like I mentioned earlier, there's this rejection of modernity happening, and sort of the poster child nations of these ideologies are the Eastern European countries that that we've been mentioning throughout this entire podcast. And I think Russia is one of them as well, at least conceptually. Russia is sort of this counterbalance to U.S. hegemony and to U.S. imperialism, and Russia stands, in the minds of people at least, still as this sort of bastion of Christianity and bastion of homogeneity. Even though, as we know, Russia isn't extremely homogeneous, but the important as sort of factor between the hegemony of the United States and globalism on this side of the world, and the influence, the sphere of influence on that side of the world. And that's why we're seeing this emergence of Russophobia essentially emerging once again in the United States and between the NATO allies. As we know, NATO's expansionism is going eastbound, and Russia feels threatened by this because NATO has troops all around Russia in the Baltic region, and we have this entire new wave of anti-Russian sentiment in the U.S. Being pushed once again by both the Democrats and the neocons and another group, Echo, which has always hated Russia throughout history. So Russia to me is important in the sense that it represents this balancing power that is sort of a checkmate to the hegemony and the influence of the United States. So it's essentially a balance of two powers, and this is what I see Russia leading the role and being sort of the trendsetter for the rest of Europe, and especially the bloc countries and these various Eastern European countries.
So do you think that there's something to the traditionally minded people in Western Europe and the United States looking to Russia? And I mean, I know you were just saying with the women, it's not as cut and dry as some of the stereotypes that people have, but it sounds like you're saying that Russia does have something going for it in terms of being a more traditional society. Do you think, from what you know of it, that overall it's healthier in terms of the social fabric and what it provides for people and families there?
It's honestly hard for me to say. I haven't visited Russia. I definitely plan to visit Moscow, probably within the next year, maybe even this summer. And not because I'm a Russian paid troll or something, but just because I'm absolutely fascinated with Russia as a country. Now, I think on a sort of a different topic, I think there's this sort of perception once again in the United States, and especially amongst people in our movement and on the right wing and within various conservative movements, that countries like Poland, based Poland or Mother Russia, that they represent these bastions of Christianity, tradition, nationalism, etc., etc. Now, this is obviously true to some extent, but Russia, as much as I love it, I do admit that it's a country that is still plagued with a lot of problems, a lot of corruption, and much of the same brainwashing that's happening out here in the West is happening in Russia as well. So it's very hard for me to say. I mean, as much as I do love Russia, and as much as I feel this orthodox connection with Russia, which has always been a historical ally of Serbia, I do admit that Russia does have a lot of problems, but at the same time, I do value it as this counterbalancing force to the NATO hegemony of the United States and the United Nations, and that's crucial, and that's exactly why they're trying to surround and isolate Russia, and essentially set up these pro-Western puppet governments all around it, because they know that Russia is sort of the last standing force on that side of the world. If NATO's already in South Korea, in Asia, and Russia is this big landmass that's virtually unconquered, and it's essentially the last obstacle to complete NATO expansionism.
I have one more question to wrap up then, because you're in an interesting position, being someone that's from Serbia but has lived in North America, so you have some perspectives on both. If we were able to throw off the shackles of the rogue shadow elements of government and the international banking system that has so much of this by the throat, culturally speaking, so forget those nefarious influences, but culturally speaking, do you think there's enough that unites us so that there can be some kind of a loose alliance, federation, and cultural understanding around pretty much the northern ring of the world, Russia, Europe, North America, that there can be this northern hemisphere alliance of the European peoples?
That's an interesting question, and while our white identity is obviously a unifying factor, and our mentalities, I do see big inherent differences between Europeans, particularly. Serbians are a lot different than Swedes, the way we think, the way we act, and vice versa. And I'm sort of against this kind of grouping. I'm more for ethno-states and ethno-nationalism, as opposed to these big, sort of alliances.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean a government. I didn't mean just to clarify, I didn't mean like one government. I mean ethno-states, but that have each other's backs and have a common cultural understanding as well.
Yes, I mean, I do see something like that being possible, especially considering the fact that most of us, if not all of us, are Christian nations, and that's a big unifying factor. And I mean, I could see these alliances forming, and they should be forming, because all of us essentially we all live in the same environments, we all face the same problems, and we all have very similar vested interests that we can help each other out with. But I just don't know how realistic it is, and how something like this would even be initiated or would start up. But I definitely do see a number of unifying factors that could make this work, but at the same time a whole load of differences as well that we shouldn't maybe try to artificialize in order for something like this to happen, essentially.
Well, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. We've really tapped into Slav, but it's about time to tap out for the show. So it's been really fantastic. And I must say that Slav has been speaking truth to falsehood tonight. And speaking truth to falsehood, especially when it's falsehood within the white positive sphere, is one of the most difficult things to do. So we really appreciate him being honest and coming through for the cause of white well-being with that honesty. So appreciate that deeply. What I'd like to do before we totally tap out is find out from Slav first what he's working on and what he'll be working on next, and where folks can find him. And then we'll jump over to my colleague, Jared George, for the same. So Slav, please.
So you guys can find me on YouTube, obviously. The channel is Squatting Slav TV. I don't want to spoil the video that I'm working on right now. It might upset some people. It'll be up, if not tomorrow, then by Monday for sure. I've sort of hinted to these two what it's about, but we'll leave that as a surprise. And then obviously you guys can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/Squatting Slav TV official, Facebook as well. I have a Facebook page, Squatting Slav TV. And if you want to collaborate with me on any projects, or if you have questions for me, please feel free to email me. I can't stress this enough. I am pretty responsive when it comes to email correspondence. I might take a few weeks to answer. Sorry, not a few weeks. Wow, never mind. A few days to answer, but I definitely will. So I'm quite receptive to these things. And yeah, that's about it for me. And make sure you guys share this podcast because I absolutely had a wonderful time with these two, and I look forward to being on here again.
Well, the feeling is mutual. We're glad that you've finally been on the after party, and now we can do more together. It's great to be in contact. We actually, to that point, and to the great time we're having, we have a fantastic last-minute super chat from Luke, who is definitely going for the crown winner of the week and has supported not only this particular show, but some of the other brother streams that Jason and I are starting to do as well. Luke shows up a lot. Luke, your support and your generosity mean the world. $50 through our Streamlabs. And again, if you're listening in the replay, you can always donate through Streamlabs. And if it's not working, then just check the other links we put in our video descriptions. Wonderful stream, as always, serious, intelligent, and entertaining. I like to think of your streams as a night out with friends. Well, that means a lot, because Jason and I did want to create that camaraderie, that feeling of camaraderie and having fun, but also learning a lot. So it's great to see that what we're trying to do is being reflected back at us. So Luke, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone else who's been part of this, the moderators as well. Sadinsky, Dainty, Pravada was in there for a moment. I will just say my site is thegreatorder.com. Everything I do goes through there. So every stream I've been on, whether I'm hosting or a guest, every video I do, it's an archive, but also the t-shirts I make, some articles I've done, that Euro migrant crisis fact sheet I mentioned. I write some poetry that's imbued with the ethno spirit of the European peoples, and all my social media, all ways to support. So that's the way to do it. I have an email list as well. I do encourage people being in direct contact so we don't have to rely on the social media platforms. We've seen how they can be a little shaky. But I'd like to point people to the epic stream that Jason did last night about supply chains being cut. It was a thing to behold. Jason's solo stream, sitting back and watching from the audience's perspective, just made me in awe of this man even more. The respect and love that I have for Jason, I can't put it into words. And then him and I did a follow-up stream where we were able to speak a little more candidly about it, had some guests come on. We also did a great show with Mark. I was able to return to This Week on the Alt-Right a few days ago. We spoke to Henrik and Lana, so please check that out. I have a recent video called The Indian Wedding Story, and it's a little metaphor about ethnoculture. I think it's a nice way to get your mind working in a different way. I was also, things are getting busier, some more to say. I was also on Verbo Tempestus last night, and Jason was on their show a couple of weeks ago as well. Great guys. They have a very positive mindset. They're people that are interested in a lot of things, curious about a lot of things. So we definitely see a lot of crossover with them. And I think we're going to be speaking with the guys, Rory and Kaiser from Verbo Tempestus more. They're definitely friends of the show. But all that great stuff, please check it out. We love you. We love your support. Again, great speaking to Slav. And Jason, I hand the reins over to you to take us out. I give you the honors, my friend.
Thank you, good sir. And I perfectly mirror back every sentiment that you shared from me to you, my friend, colleague, and warrior in this cause for white well-being. And the same, a great thanks to Slav for appearing with us. And we hope he will appear with us again, and maybe some street stunts in the future. We'll find a way to make it happen, even though we live on different sides of a large continent, much smaller than the continent from which he came. So
there's another super chat.
Oh.
I have to interrupt. We try to honor everyone that donates. Yes. PM gives $10 again through my Streamlabs. Thank you so much. Just says thanks for the streams. Thank you for your support.
You are most welcome. Thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you all for being here with us, live and in replay. Thank everyone who made comments and participated in the chat, asked questions. Of course, a huge thanks to everybody who super chatted during the show. We appreciate it. And I want to spotlight a few people I saw in the audience. I saw Stephen, I saw Glenn, I saw Sword of Kulanban, Megiddo, Good Mackie, European Spirit I saw there. And we also had a super chat, I'm not sure if I read or not, by Bill O'Hore for $5. He writes, Jason, please, really do go with Slav and make a video. It will be gold. It would absolutely, my friend. And we will look into making it happen one way or another. If you have not already subscribed to both of these sterling gentlemen, please do so. Please support them financially. I also want to give an enormous thanks to my colleague Jared George for everything he does to make these shows entertaining, exciting, informative for all of you. Please do thank him financially, thank him orally, give him your support, subscribe to his work, and we will look forward to seeing you all right here on tap next time.